Welcome, friends, back to another episode of the Performance Mindset Show. I am your host, Amy Calandrino, CEO of Beyond Commercial and author of the book From Perfect to Real. This show is all about leveling up in business, real estate, leadership, and life by shifting how you think, grow, and lead. Each week, I'll bring you real conversations with top performers and mindset experts who are building big lives on their own. If you're ready to ditch perfection, trust your path, and grow with intention, you are in the right place. Be sure to subscribe and let's get into it. So today I have with me Dr. Patrick Cohn, and he is actually in the Orlando area. And we actually discovered we had some mutual friends, but he's been an athlete his entire life and mental game coach. His passion for sports and sports psychology started early in life and continued to grow as he participated in sports such as football, hockey, baseball, lacrosse, racquetball, tennis, and golf. I thought I had a few hobbies. You have more. So Dr. Cohn earned a master's degree in sports psychology at CSUF with Dr. Ken Ravizza. And he went on to study with Dr. Bob Rotella at the University of Virginia, where he got a Ph.D. in education, specializing in applied sports psychology. Today, he is president of Peak Performance Sports in Orlando, where he provides mental toughness training to individual and team athletes. He is with high-profile teams and athletes such as the Miami Dolphins, NASCAR winners, NHL players, NFL players, national motocross champions, and PGA professional golfers. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Amy. Quite an introduction.
Yeah. What I find is so interesting is it seems you've been in Orlando a long time, is how much our entire area has grown. And there's probably a lot more there are a lot more sports opportunities than there ever has been before.
Yeah, interestingly, I moved up to Orlando because there are a lot of mini tours here. I lived down in Naples in South Florida, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, there's a lot of mini tours. You do great up in Orlando," and that's exactly what I did. I moved here in '96, I think, and and started going out to the mini tours and introducing myself, and that's kind of how I got it started here in Orlando. But I've been working with golfers probably since 85, I want to say 85, 86 is really when I started, when I was at Cal State Fullerton.
Wow. And is that, I know you coach a variety of athletes. Is golf one that you do a lot of coaching in, or is it just, it really varies?
Yeah, I have 3 coaches that work for me, and we work with athletes from 12 years and up to senior athletes, tennis players, 3.5, 4.0 tennis players. I today, Amy, only work with professional athletes and some of the collegiate athletes as well. But, when I think about performance is performance for us, right? I don't know if I told you earlier, but we work with traders. I work with day traders as well. So we've worked with musicians, right? Equestrians, athletes, obviously, in many, many different sports. And when I think of mental skills, are for performance. Doesn't really matter what the endeavor is. It can be surgeons. Really can be anything. So I think the realm of sports psychology can really be applied to performance enhancement, mental skills, and really any discipline where there is a performance.
Well, I find, and you find, I'm sure as well, is that ultimately it's your mindset that leads to your behavior that ultimately later on leads to the outcome. So if you can shift that, through the methodologies that I'm sure you deploy, it thereby influences the outcome and improves your performance. But
Exactly.
It's not as easy as that.
Exactly. And I would call it beliefs and expectations affect your thinking, and then thus your performance. So I have a little different twist to it.
Beliefs
and expectations.
Okay.
affect athletes and performers' thinking, which then obviously is going to affect their performance. So when you use mindset, basically, I use beliefs, and I just dial it down a little bit more.
Over the years, and of course, you've worked with a number of different athletes in a wide variety of sports. What do you find, though, the number one um, um, stopping block to them in their belief system?
Well, it's interesting. We work with a lot of perfectionists. So the number one thing we see is perfectionism. But when we talk about perfectionism, Amy, it's got many different levels. It's the many different challenges associated with perfection, which includes those high expectations, which includes getting easily frustrated when they're not reaching those expectations, very self-critical. We find that there's a lot of social approval attached with perfectionism as well. And a lack of trust in their skills because of fear of failure and anxiety when they perform. So it's a very big umbrella for us when we think about the challenge of perfectionism and perfectionist, because it has many different levels and many different challenges associated with it. However, it's the reason why athletes are good. It's the reason why performers are good, reason why businessmen and women are good, right, across the board. Where it starts to interfere is in competition for athletes in particular. That's when they start to sabotage with fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, worrying about what others think, and the payoff syndrome. The payoff syndrome, which I coined, is kind of like working hard, putting in all the effort, and not reaching your goals. Like athletes start to question, is this all worth it? And that becomes a source of pressure and expectation for athletes too, is if I'm going to put in all this time and effort, I need to reach my goals. So when I say there's many levels to perfectionism in athletics, that's what I mean.
In the payoff syndrome, do you find that tends to impact athletes and those you work with at all different phases of their development in the sport, or do you find that it maybe comes maybe at a part where they're really starting to, maybe like they're plateauing or they're just about to break through?
Yeah, I think it's getting to the next level. I think it's athletes who from high school want to go to college and want to compete in college, and then athletes that are in college that want to go pro. Those are the main objectives or goals for that group. And I think that's where it really affects them. Am I getting closer to being able to play college ball, for example? Or am I getting closer to being able to go out and try out for a pro team? So those will be the goals that they badly want to achieve.
And how do you find that they can kind of push through this and get to that next level? I
When
mean,
working,
obviously, it's multifaceted. You can't fix things in like one day, but um, how do you find? Do you have to almost visualize getting there, or how would one at this point? What would be the best like piece of advice for them if they're stuck at that spot?
when working with perfectionists in
Yes.
particular.
Yeah, maybe let's use perfectionist, yes, as an example.
Yes. Love to read your new book too. Sounds great. Love the title.
I got actually. I think I went through payoff syndrome. So I got to this point. I'm like, I am closing down my brokerage. I am overwhelmed. I just can't handle this anymore. It's too much. I started building it out to be so big because that's what I thought everybody else wanted me to do. And now I've more so like right sized it into more of like a craft, boutique firm. And we just have maybe like a half dozen of us, and it's much more manageable. But I was really overwhelmed, and was not making money. I was managing a lot of people. I was not delivering the level of services that I like, and so I was very unhappy. And I was like, I'm closing down the brokerage. I'm done.
So I'll preface it and say that perfectionists have really good qualities when it comes to their work ethic, when it comes to their practice habits, when it comes to putting in the work consistently day in and day out, when it can be boring work for them. So they're very goal oriented. And these are the reasons why perfectionists are good. But I find that many of the perfectionists we work with, they sabotage themselves with many of those challenges. So I do a certification course. It's called the Mental Game Coaching Pro Certification, MGCP course. And in it, we talk about working with perfectionists. And I always, tell my students, look, jump in anywhere. Start anywhere with perfectionists, and you're going to be helpful with them. So we like to talk about managing the expectations and the pressure they feel from it. And we can drill down on any of these, focusing on the process instead of the outcome and the end result, having proactive and stable confidence, and trusting in their skills, which means being able to take their skills from practice to competition and not get in the way of themselves. So those are big steps that we take initially with perfectionists, but jump in and just help them anywhere. And it doesn't have to be that organized from that perspective, but that's where we like to start, particularly with perfectionists, because they struggle with those 4 components.
Yeah. And I think you have to find your zone. I participate in a golf league, and not only am I already overanalyzing what I'm doing, right? But then if I start to hear negative talk or this or that, then that starts to kind of seep in, and you have to find a way to then keep flipping the script on every single hole, and every next hole is a new opportunity, and not to focus on what I just did. And it's I feel like I'm just talking to myself in my head, and then I'm like, wait, you got to stop. You got to clear your head. So it's I think perfectionists will probably keep you busy for a really long time.
Yes, and golf is a very difficult game, as you know.
Yeah, it is. It is. And then you've been doing this now in the Orlando area since 1996. And do you actually meet with people in person, or do you also do coaching throughout the country? What is your approach?
We do worldwide. We work with athletes worldwide, Dubai, Spain, Italy, wherever. But yeah, so we do work with local athletes that want to come into the office. Certainly, but majority, 90% of our work is actually through a medium like this, like a Zoom meet, and do virtual coaching. I have a coach in Chicago, I have a coach in Miami, and then I have a coach here with me in Orlando as well. And then I'll do some of the coaching with the higher level athletes.
Wow. For those that maybe know someone who is an athlete and looking to kind of get to the next level, but and wants to do coaching, can you talk about maybe specifically some examples where you've deployed the coaching with someone and helped them get to the next level?
Yeah.
And the value that it can deliver.
So I worked with a motocross racer. His name was Matt Bonney. It started in 2004, and he was my first motocross racer. And Matt, you talked about mindset, affecting your thinking and performance. And that was it with Matt. Like, he saw himself as a top 5 racer, but he was having trouble seeing himself as a number 1 or number 2 racer. And so when he'd go to those events, those races, then when he was in position 3, he's comfortable. He's in that comfort zone because he saw himself as a top 5 racer. And he had trouble charging to the front. So I was able to work with Matt on that and help him get beyond some of those, preconceived notions, expectations of where he fit. I call it, really just on the start line, he would number himself on the start line, place himself. where he thought he would finish, which is not the best approach. But in any event, Matt was able to win a couple national championships and eventually went pro. And he was from this area.
Wow. That's awesome. And then it kind of boiled down to even the way that he would position himself in the beginning in the starting lineup. And he was already kind of setting himself up.
Sizing himself up with the fast riders around him, knowing, well, he's good for a 1 or he's good for a top 3, but I'm good for a top 5. And he didn't see himself on an equal level. Some athletes, they'll put others on a pedestal, and that creates some level of what we call self-intimidation, where you're intimidating yourself and you're keeping yourself stuck in that comfort zone.
It would seem to me as well, and then the thought just escaped me as well, is, obviously he can't take you out with him out on the course. And so obviously when that kind of doubt seeps in and you are in the middle of your performance, whether it is golf or tennis or otherwise, obviously trying to think of everything you're supposed to do. But if you start to have that self-doubt creep in, what are some helpful tactics to kind of suppress that and kind of reset and realign yourself?
Good question. So we would sit down with an athlete before they go into competition. We would want to know what their triggers are, certainly, so we can work with their triggers. But eventually, we know exactly how they doubt, when they doubt, and what it sounds like. Then we practice reframing those doubts with them to rationalize, in essence, rationalize those doubts away. And so we give them a choice. You can either continue to doubt or you can choose a different way of thinking. So really, a lot of what I do is anticipate and cope, which means I'm going to give you an alternate way of thinking when you start to doubt yourself after you miss your drive in the fairway, or you miss a short putt, or you miss that free throw, or whatever the situation may be. We develop those doubts, and then we develop the rebuttals or the reframes, comebacks, if you will. They'll rehearse those so they're well learned, and then they have something to go to once they are in that position and they make a mistake and they start to doubt. So it's really about the preparation, the anticipation and coping that we do. A lot of what we do is around that. Same could be said for managing mistakes, right? Like, okay, what are the triggers? And then what's the thought process? And now let's come in with a little bit more of a healthy way of thinking about that mistake. And that's super important for perfectionists too, because they have a lot of triggers that set them off and lead them down the path of being self-critical.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm in a 9-hole group. I'd love to be in the 18. I probably should visualize. I could be in the 18s if I want. I shouldn't say to myself, I am a 9er, but I could be an 18 if I wanted to. But what's interesting is we're going through right now where everybody keeps hitting their ball on a particular hole. And so now they're wanting to modify all the rules for this. And I'm like, well, I think you just have to do a little bit of course management or shift your mindset about this. And they're like, oh, Amy, and your mindset. But if we keep visualizing that you're going to keep going in the hole, you're going to go in the water. You're going to keep going in the water. So you got to shift that or handle the hole a little bit differently.
Well, how about a mulligan every hole? Would that work?
No,
not allowed.
No, not allowed. There's some of us that are very competitive. We don't want anybody to get a mulligan.
Okay.
No, it's interesting, but they're like, Amy, in your mindset. And I'm like, well, visualize it going in. And that was what one of my my golf coaches early on, and he actually, and I understand you studied with Dr. Bob Rotella, but he, my golf coach always told me, if you're going to visualize it going in the water, it's going to go in the water. And so you visualize it, hitting the green up there. You have a much better chance of it hitting the green rather than focusing on the water. And I'm like, okay. So that's what I try to do and remind myself when I'm taking those kinds of shots that are high precision type of opportunities.
Yeah. I call it having a positive intention rather than avoidance behavior. The avoidance behavior is, don't miss it there, don't hit it there, and don't mess up, don't embarrass yourself. A lot of athletes
Mm.
are somewhat oriented towards that. We try to get them to focus on a positive intention. And that is just what you stated. You can try and visualize a good shot. You can think about the shot tracer of it going to your target. You can focus 100% on the target, engage with the target. You can think about hitting the shot solid, making a good free, loose swing. Those are all positive, what we call positive intentions, and we leave it up to the athlete what's their ideal positive intention they want to go with. So we find that some are more kinesthetic oriented, more feel kinesthetic, and other athletes are more visual oriented. So it's going to come down to where their learning style is in terms of those particular thoughts or images that we want them to engage in. So visualizing would be for a visual.
Yep.
I used to work with Grant Wade. He was a 2-time tour winner. And Grant asked me, he said, I can't visualize my shots. We were out at Bay Hill one year, and he said, I don't see it like Jack Nicklaus talks about, going to the movies in his mind. I'm like, well, not everybody's a visualizer in the pure sense.
Right.
Some people are more feelers. They're more kinesthetic. And I said, you can feel the flight of the ball. You can feel the path of the putt. You don't necessarily have to visual or see a visual. And he was like, oh, that was relieving for him. He was like, oh, really? And so forcing athletes into a modality that they're not comfortable with is not the ideal, performance setup for them.
Is it kinesthetic, you said?
Yeah, kinesthetic, feel-oriented.
Yeah. Is that also when you're taking like your practice and seeing, how everything's feeling?
Yes. So do you ever feel good tempo on a practice swing?
Yeah. Yeah. And I did have the other day where it didn't feel quite right, but I felt like I was rushed with a group behind me. And I'm like, and why am I worrying about, making them happy? I should have done it again because it did not go well. Yes.
Yes. So yeah, if you take that practice swing and you feel good tempo and you take it up over the ball and you just try to repeat that tempo, now it's not visual, it's more feel oriented, but it's still a good image. It's still a positive intention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's good to have that good feel going into it. If you don't feel the good feel, you should, realign yourself before you go and
take another one.
Yep. Exactly. Now, I find that's interesting. So you did write the book, The Confident Athlete. When did that come out?
We did a series of, I want to
series.
say in the mid 90s, we did a series called the Confident Athlete series. And
it was a series. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have the confident, the focused, the composed, the fearless, and the relaxed athlete. And those have been super popular for us. Today, we produce more sport-specific stuff. Like we have one for golf. We have the Golfer's Mental Edge 2.0, Tennis Confidence 2.0, which are our programs that we also use when working with our athletes as reinforcement tools.
Wow. So you've been able to kind of, I would imagine every single sport has nuances from the others in different.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Tennis is way different than golf, and soccer is way different than tennis, of course. So they all have their own nuances and specific challenges too, as well.
Which sports do you think naturally are probably the most different in the way that you would approach it, having worked with people across a wide variety?
I would say golf and also baseball. Golf and baseball. It's because of the amount of downtime that you have, the amount of time you can think, the amount of time you can overthink it, the amount of time you get down on yourself while you walk to your next shot, right? So there's just, and the ball stays stationary. It's sometimes easier in a fast-paced sport like soccer, where you're just reacting and you're playing athletically on the field. So less opportunity to overthink, although we do work with overthinkers on the soccer field as well. But in a fast-paced hockey, ice hockey, soccer, those type of things, less opportunity, less downtime to have those doubts and indecisions and negative thoughts come in.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it with baseball, especially, if you don't get your chance up at bat, and then you got to wait again to be next in line, to be in bats, or in golf, you're having to wait to get to the next shot, that the cadence of it is different than, perhaps, another sport where you're just continually performing.
Yeah, and you can blend in team sports. So golf and baseball, it's a little bit more like Ken Revisa, one of my mentors at Cal State Fullerton. He would say that it's, you're standing alone in front of the gods, and it's like all eyes are on you when you're a pitcher or a hitter or when you're a golfer. And so it adds that extra challenge, certainly.
I do want to talk about something interesting and perhaps how you help athletes. So golfers, for instance, at Bay Hill, you have the Bay Hill Invitational, or I think they call it the Arnold Palmer Invitational now. And you have cell phones are permitted. So you have all of these spectators with all their cell phones, and you really didn't have to deal with that necessarily, back, 20 years ago. Yeah, even we didn't really have handhelds versus, participating like in Augusta where there's no cell phones or other things. Do you find that the people not only being all eyes on them, plus having people recording them, how do you find that that's having a negative impact and making things harder for athletes?
It's not. I mean, as far as if they don't have it on silent and it goes off in the middle of their swing, now that's a problem. But as far as others recording them, they're so used to having cameras at the professional level, and they're not really focused on being recorded by fans or the camera. They're focused on what they need to do to execute the golf shot.
Yeah.
And that's super important. It's like, well, how do football players in a stadium of 80,000 fans screaming, literally, how do they focus? Right?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? It just becomes a background hum for them. They don't really hear anything specific. It's just a background noise. And they're able to go and execute in those situations.
Yeah. Well, I've read some articles over the years, or at least one or two, where there are golfers that wish there was more of like an Augusta kind of atmosphere at these other places, because it can be so distracting, or someone yells out in the middle of your swing and those types of things, and there just tends sometimes to be a bit more rowdiness, and it's hard to concentrate with all that going on.
Yeah, but I think golf fans, by and large, they respect the golfers. There are a couple of events that get really rowdy, certainly. Yeah, out in Scottsdale, they have an event that gets really loud on a couple holes. So, but they enjoy that kind of like that twist or that change in pace for them.
Yeah. Yeah, really interesting. Well, no, I think this has been great, conversation. My question for you is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today about mindset?
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know. So what we tell parents and athletes is, look, if you're a star in practice and things are breaking down in competition for you, where you're performing tight, you're performing scared, you're not focused, you're distracted, you're more uptight, that's a sign that the mental game is getting in the way. So there's a big majority of athletes that don't understand that and don't realize that, and don't realize that there are resources for them to improve their mindset when they go from practice to competition and perform more relaxed, perform with less fear, to manage the fear of failure. We try to educate them. We educate them at kidsportspsychology.com and also peaksports.com as well.
That's awesome. And is kids plural and then sports psychology after that?
Kidsportspsychology.com for parents with young athletes. And then our mothership is peaksports.com, which I started in 96.
I know, that's a great domain name.
I've heard that.
So being someone that's in business and marketing. Well, and speaking of children, and my kids are just getting into golf now. They're only 4 and 5 years old, and but they're doing their weekly clinics and getting into all of that.
Great.
What would be any other tips that you would recommend to any kind of parents for children starting to get into competitive sports?
Introduce them to a lot of different activities, like golf and dance and soccer, just different variety of activities, because that will build their motor skills when they're in different activities, right? And be a good cheerleader, be a good parent on the sidelines as well with them, and try to avoid rewarding them for winning or for performing well. Like, you want them to be, at 12, you want them to be self-motivated. You don't want them to be parent motivated, right? So
I was going to ask you why. And so they get their own sense of self-reliance and independence.
That the joy comes from getting in the flow and just being with their friends, being competitive, doing a physical activity. That Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote Flow, he would say it's autotelic, that sports in and of itself is a reward, and you don't have to reward kids. The research says it's controlling. It can be controlling to reward kids for participation or for wins and stuff like that. But biggest tip is involve them in lots of different movement activities, and wherever they land, as far as a sport, if they choose to continue in high school, I should say grade school, middle school, high school for you, right?
I know.
If they continue, then they'll have a lot of movement background, which is really, really big.
That's a great tip. And I think it has to be a balance, because there's so many things that you can do. But I think, and then we're just getting them into much more going to swim and, gymnastics and, all kinds of different things to really kind of get them out there. But they've really, really taken to golf, both of them. I have a boy and a girl, and the boy, his coach came to me the other day, and she's like, he's got this like grounding now with him, like when he is out there, versus he came very hyper the first few weeks. And I think there's sometimes different states that you kind of go through as you start to kind of progress. And of course, he's super early on his journey, but she's like, I can just already sense it, like he's grounding himself. And I'm like, well, that's cool.
Yeah, I bet golf has that effect.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But no, I think those are great tips. I have a lot of folks that have that are leaders that listen to this, and athletes, and many have children. So I think that's some great advice. Well, awesome. Well, what is the best way? You gave a couple of your websites. What are some other ways to get a hold of you, or what's the best method? Is it to go to peaksports.com or the kids?
Send us an email, or they can give us a call, 407-909-1700.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. I'm so glad we could connect and hopefully stay connected in this area, and love all that you're doing here. Thank you to all my listeners as well for listening to another episode of the Performance Mindset Show. If today's episode gave you something to think about, Share it and subscribe so you don't miss out on what's next. Want to go deeper? Be sure to grab my book, Perfect to Real. It's all about dropping perfection and thriving your own way. You can also connect with me at beyondcommercial.com or amycalendrino.com. Until next time, stay grounded, stay growing, and keep showing up for you.